When I first saw the house on Blue Ridge Lane, it felt like stepping into a dream. The moment Daniel and I turned onto the street, I could feel my heart skip a beat. It was everything we'd been searching for: quiet, peaceful, and beautiful. The houses were all neatly lined up with manicured lawns, white picket fences, and colorful flower beds that looked like they belonged in a magazine. At the end of the cul-de-sac stood our future home, a cozy little two-story house with large windows and a front porch perfect for sipping coffee in the mornings. The neighborhood seemed almost too good to be true. Every detail screamed perfect. Kids played basketball in driveways while parents chatted nearby. Neighbors waved as we drove past, their smiles warm and welcoming. For the first time in years, I felt like we were finally where we belonged. After months of saving, planning, and stressing over finances, this place felt like a reward, a fresh start after years of city chaos. But what I didn't realize at the time was that buying a house in an HOA neighborhood wasn't just about owning property. It came with strings attached. Strings I hadn't fully understood yet. On move-in day, we were greeted by Mrs. Evelyn Harper, the head of the Homeowners Association, or, as I later learned, the self-appointed Queen Bee of Blue Ridge Lane. She arrived carrying a clipboard and wearing a smile so polished it almost blinded me. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, her outfit pressed within an inch of its life, and her heels clicked sharply against the pavement as she approached us. "Welcome to Blue Ridge," she said, extending a hand. Her voice was sweet, but carried an undertone of authority that made me want to stand up straighter. "We're thrilled to have you join our community." She handed me a thick packet labeled HOA Guidelines. "You'll find everything you need here. Rules for landscaping, parking, exterior paint colors, even holiday decorations. We take pride in maintaining uniformity." Uniformity. That word stuck with me long after she left. Uniformity sounded nice in theory, but it also felt restrictive, like someone else was deciding how my life should look. Still, I brushed off the thought. This was our dream home, and nothing, not even a few rules, was going to ruin it. For the first few weeks, everything seemed fine. Our neighbors brought over welcome baskets filled with homemade cookies and handwritten notes. People stopped to chat during evening walks, asking about our jobs, our families, and whether we needed recommendations for plumbers or electricians. It all felt so wholesome. Too wholesome, maybe, but I told myself I was being paranoid. Then came the small things, the subtle reminders that living here meant following someone else's playbook. Like when Daniel parked his truck on the street overnight because the garage was full of boxes, and a polite note appeared on our windshield reminding us that street parking was prohibited after 10 p.m., or when I planted a row of sunflowers along the fence, only to receive another note saying they weren't on the approved list of plants. Each incident felt minor on its own, but together, they started to weigh on me. I tried not to let it bother me. After all, these rules existed to keep the neighborhood looking nice, right? But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something about this place wasn't quite as perfect as it seemed. And then one morning, I found a letter slipped under our door that changed everything. The letter was typed neatly on official HOA letterhead, and the words jumped off the page like a slap in the face. "Your mailbox does not conform to community standards. Please repaint within 7 days or face fines." I read it twice, then once more just to make sure I wasn't imagining things. Our mailbox. Really, it wasn't falling apart, rusted, or even dirty. Sure, it was a slightly different shade of white than the others on the street, but it was still, well, white. How could something so trivial be considered a violation? I showed the note to Daniel when he came downstairs for breakfast. He squinted at it, his coffee mug halfway to his lips. "Are they serious?" he asked, shaking his head. "This is ridiculous." "It's not just ridiculous," I muttered, pacing the kitchen. "It's controlling. Who cares what color the mailbox is? Does it really affect anyone's life that much?" Daniel shrugged, trying to play it cool. "Maybe it's just their way of keeping things looking nice, Let's just paint it and move on. But I couldn't let it go. That mailbox became symbolic of something bigger, a feeling that we weren't truly free here, no matter how beautiful the neighborhood looked. Every time I passed it on my way out, I felt a pang of frustration. Was this really how we were going to live our lives now? Constantly second-guessing ourselves, worried about breaking some invisible rule. Things only got worse from there. A week later, another letter arrived. This time, it was about the curtains in our living room. Apparently, they were too bright. The HOA preferred neutral tones, and our cheerful yellow drapes didn't meet their standards. I stared at the note in disbelief, then marched over to Evelyn Harper's house, determined to get answers. Evelyn greeted me with her usual polished smile, though I noticed her eyes narrowed slightly when she saw the envelope in my hand. "Ah, Mrs. Carter," she said smoothly. "I assume you're here about the curtain notice." "Yes," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Can you explain why my curtains are suddenly an issue?" "They're inside my house. How does that even affect the neighborhood?" She tilted her head, as if considering my question carefully. "Well, dear, while your curtains may be indoors, they're visible from the street. And as you know, maintaining aesthetic consistency is important for property values." "Aesthetic consistency," I repeated, incredulous. "You're telling me people driving by care what color my curtains are?" "It's not about individual preferences," she explained patiently, though her tone suggested she thought I was being unreasonable. "It's about creating a cohesive look that benefits everyone. Surely you understand." I didn't understand, not fully, but I left her house feeling defeated. Arguing with Evelyn felt like trying to reason with a brick wall. She had rules, policies, and procedures backing her up, and no amount of logic seemed capable of breaking through. Over the next few weeks, the letters kept coming. One day it was about the height of our hedges. They needed trimming. Another day, it was about the placement of our recycling bins. They had to be stored out of sight. Each new complaint chipped away at my patience until I started dreading the sound of footsteps on our porch. At first, Daniel tried to reassure me. "It's just paperwork," he'd say. "Let's fix the little stuff and focus on enjoying the house." But even he began to grow uneasy as the list of infractions piled up. It wasn't just about the mailbox or the curtains anymore. It felt like we were being watched, judged, and found wanting at every turn. One evening, as I sat on the couch flipping through yet another stack of notices, I realized something unsettling. These rules weren't just about keeping the neighborhood tidy. They were about control, about making sure everyone fell in line without question. And the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Who gave them the right to dictate how we lived our lives? We weren't hurting anyone. We were just trying to build a home. That anger simmered inside me, growing stronger with each passing day. I knew I couldn't fight every battle. That would drive me crazy. But I also knew I couldn't stay silent forever. Something had to give. Little did I know, the worst was yet to come. It started with a strange sight that stopped me in my tracks one sunny afternoon. As I pulled into the driveway after running errands, I noticed a group of men in bright orange vests gathered near the towering oak tree at the edge of our yard. They were huddled around its massive trunk, measuring tape in hand, scribbling notes onto clipboards. My heart sank as I got out of the car and walked over to see what was going on. "What's happening here?" I asked, trying to sound calm despite the unease creeping up my spine. One of the men glanced up, looking slightly uncomfortable. "Ma'am, we're assessing whether this tree needs removal," he said, gesturing toward the clipboard. "The HOA requested an inspection." "Removal," I repeated, my voice rising. "Why would you remove this tree? It's perfectly healthy. Look at it. It's beautiful." He hesitated, glancing at his coworker before answering. "Well, there's concern about the roots. Apparently, they'd been causing issues with the sewer lines under the road. If we don't address it soon, it could lead to bigger problems." I stood there, staring at the tree like it might disappear if I blinked. This wasn't just any tree. It was part of what made Blue Ridge Lane special. Its sprawling branches shaded half the street during hot summer days, and its leaves turned golden every fall, creating a breathtaking canopy. Daniel and I had fallen in love with this house partly because of this tree. Now these people wanted to cut it down over something as vague as potential problems. Determined to get answers, I marched straight to Evelyn Harper's house later that day. She answered the door with her usual polished smile, though I could tell by the flicker in her eyes that she knew exactly why I was there. "Evelyn," I began, struggling to keep my tone even, "can you explain why someone wants to cut down the oak tree in front of my house?" She sighed dramatically, as if I'd just interrupted her from solving world peace. "Oh dear, I understand your attachment to the tree, but sometimes sacrifices must be made for the greater good of the community." "Sacrifices?" I echoed, incredulous. "You're talking about cutting down a perfectly healthy tree. What greater good are we talking about here?" She crossed her arms, her patience clearly wearing thin. "The roots are damaging the infrastructure, Sarah. If we don't act now, it will cost the neighborhood thousands in repairs later. Surely you can see the logic in preventing further damage." Before I could argue, she reached behind her and pulled out an envelope. Handing it to me, she added, "And since the tree is technically within your property line, HOA bylaws dictate you're responsible for maintenance and any associated costs." I froze, staring at the envelope in my hand. Slowly, I opened it and pulled out the bill inside. The number at the bottom made my stomach drop. Thousands of dollars. For a tree I didn't ask them to inspect, much less destroy. "This has to be a joke," I said, my voice trembling. "You want me to pay for this mistake? A tree that's been here longer than most of us have lived on this street." Evelyn's expression hardened. "It's not a mistake, Sarah. These are the rules. You agreed to abide by them when you bought the house." I wanted to scream, to demand justice, but the cold reality hit me. She was right. Sort of. Buried deep in the fine print of those HOA guidelines she handed me on move-in day were clauses about property lines and responsibility. But no one had warned me that agreeing to live here meant signing away my ability to protect something as vital as a century-old tree. As I drove back home, anger burned in my chest. How could they justify destroying something so precious and then expect me to foot the bill? This wasn't just about a tree anymore. It felt like a personal attack, a way to remind me who held the power in this neighborhood. And for the first time, I realized I couldn't let them win. Not this time. That night, Daniel and I sat at the kitchen table, the bill for the tree removal staring up at us like a cruel joke. The room was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator in the background. Neither of us spoke for a long time, but the weight of what we were facing hung heavy in the air. "This is insane," I finally said, breaking the silence. "They can't seriously expect us to pay for their mistake. That tree has probably been here longer than Evelyn Harper's been alive." Daniel leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. "I know it's unfair, but fighting the HOA isn't going to be easy. You saw how she acted earlier, like this is some kind of done deal. If we push back, they'll make our lives miserable." His words stung, not because he was wrong, but because they felt true. Blue Ridge Lane prided itself on being perfect, and anyone who rocked the boat risked becoming public enemy number one. Still, something inside me refused to let this go. Maybe it was the injustice of it all, or maybe it was Evelyn's smug expression when she handed me that bill, but I couldn't bring myself to just roll over and accept it. "What if we're not alone?" I asked suddenly, sitting up straighter. "What if other people feel the same way we do? We can't be the only ones who think the HOA is out of control." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "You really think anyone else will speak up? Most people around here are too scared to even look Evelyn in the eye." "Maybe," I admitted, "but what if they just need someone to start? Someone to say enough is enough." The next morning, I decided to test my theory. Armed with determination and a thermos of coffee, I headed to the local cafe where many of our neighbors liked to gather. It was early, but the place was already buzzing with chatter. I spotted Mrs. Peterson, an older woman who lived 2 doors down, sipping tea by the window. She gave me a polite nod as I approached. "Morning, Mrs. Peterson," I said, sliding into the seat across from her. "Can I ask you something? Have you ever had issues with the HOA?" Her eyes widened slightly, and she glanced around as if making sure no one was listening. "Why do you ask?" she whispered. I hesitated, then told her about the tree, the mailbox, the curtains, all the little things that had piled up until I felt like I was drowning in rules. To my surprise, she nodded knowingly. "Oh, honey, you're not the first," she said softly. "Last year, they fined me for planting flowers that weren't on their approved list. Can you believe that? I just wanted to brighten up my yard." As the conversation continued, others chimed in. One man confessed he'd been threatened with fines for leaving his trash cans out past 8 a.m. Another woman admitted she'd stopped decorating for holidays altogether after receiving a notice about her Christmas lights being too flashy. Each story made my blood boil a little more. By the end of the day, I had a small group of neighbors willing to join forces. Together, we drafted a formal complaint outlining the HOA's unreasonable demands and sent it directly to the board. It wasn't much, but it felt like a start. A way to say we weren't going to take this lying down. Evelyn didn't take it well. The very next week, anonymous flyers began appearing around the neighborhood. They accused me of trying to ruin Blue Ridge and called me a troublemaker. Someone even spray-painted "Tree Killer" on our garage door, a twisted accusation, considering they were the ones threatening to cut it down. For a moment, doubt crept in. Was this fight worth it? Could we really win against someone so determined to crush us? Then Daniel reminded me why we couldn't give up. "They're bullying us, plain and simple," he said firmly. "If we let them get away with this, they'll keep doing it to everyone else. We have to stand our ground, for ourselves and for the neighborhood." And so we dug deeper, vowing not to back down until justice was served. The tension in the neighborhood reached a boiling point faster than I expected. The anonymous flyers accusing me of ruining Blue Ridge Lane were bad enough, but when someone spray-painted "Tree Killer" on our garage door, it felt like a personal attack. Daniel and I scrubbed at the graffiti for hours, but the words lingered in my mind long after the paint faded. It wasn't just vandalism. It was a message: back down or face the consequences. But backing down wasn't an option anymore. Every insult, every accusation only fueled my determination to fight back. If Evelyn Harper and her HOA cronies thought they could scare me into submission, they had another thing coming. One evening, as I sat at the kitchen table drafting yet another letter to the HOA board, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find 2 uniformed officers standing on our porch. My heart sank. "Mrs. Carter," one of them asked, his tone formal. "We're here regarding a report of illegal activity." "Illegal activity?" I repeated, stunned. "What are you talking about?" The officer held up a document. "There's been a complaint alleging that you tampered with the sewer lines near your property to avoid paying for the tree removal." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Tampering with sewer lines. The absurdity of the claim hit me like a punch to the gut. Not only was it completely false, but it also reeked of desperation. Someone, Evelyn, had gone to extreme lengths to discredit me. Daniel appeared behind me, his jaw tightening as he listened. "This is ridiculous," he said firmly. "We haven't touched the sewer lines. Whoever made this complaint is lying." "We'll need to investigate further," the officer replied, unfazed by Daniel's frustration. "In the meantime, please don't interfere with any ongoing assessments." After they left, I collapsed onto the couch, shaking with anger and disbelief. How dare they accuse us of something so outrageous? And how could anyone believe such a blatant lie? But the worst part wasn't the accusation itself. It was the way it divided the neighborhood. Some neighbors began avoiding us altogether, whispering behind their hands whenever we passed. Others glared openly, as if we'd brought shame upon the community. Even people who had initially supported our cause started distancing themselves, afraid of being dragged into the drama. "It's working," Daniel muttered bitterly one night as we watched the news in silence. "They're turning everyone against us." "They can try," I shot back, though doubt gnawed at me. "But they can't win unless we let them." Despite the mounting pressure, we refused to give up. Instead, we escalated our efforts. With the help of our growing coalition of disgruntled homeowners, we filed a formal ethics complaint, not just about the tree, but about everything. The unfair fines, the bullying tactics, the misuse of power. We sent copies to the State Housing Authority, local news outlets, and even federal agencies. It was a risky move. I knew it would make us targets. But we were out of options. To my surprise, the tide began to turn. A few brave neighbors stepped forward, sharing their own stories of mistreatment by the HOA. One woman revealed she'd been fined for having a birdbath in her yard because it disrupted aesthetic consistency. Another man admitted he'd been forced to repaint his front door 3 times because the color kept getting rejected. Their testimonies added weight to our case, painting a picture of an organization more interested in control than community. Then came the moment none of us saw coming. At the next HOA meeting, a tense gathering held in the community center, 2 men in dark suits walked in without warning. Everyone fell silent as they flashed badges and introduced themselves as federal agents. "Good evening," one of them said calmly. "We're here to look into allegations of financial misconduct within the Homeowners Association." The room erupted into murmurs, but Evelyn's reaction said it all. Her face went pale, her clipboard slipping from her grasp and clattering to the floor. For the first time since I'd met her, she looked utterly defeated. As the agents began asking questions, I realized we'd struck a nerve deeper than we'd imagined. This wasn't just about trees or mailboxes anymore. It was about accountability. And for once, it seemed like justice might actually be within reach. The presence of federal agents at the HOA meeting sent shockwaves through Blue Ridge Lane. What had started as a personal battle over a tree had spiraled into something far bigger, something that exposed cracks in the foundation of our seemingly perfect neighborhood. As the agents began questioning Evelyn and other board members, the air in the room grew thick with tension. Neighbors exchanged uneasy glances, some whispering behind cupped hands, while others sat frozen in their seats, unsure whether to feel horrified or hopeful. Evelyn tried to maintain her composure, but it was clear she was unraveling. Her usual polished demeanor crumbled under the weight of the agent's questions. "This is all a misunderstanding," she stammered, clutching her pearls like they were a lifeline. "We've always acted in the best interest of the community." But the evidence told a different story. Records revealed that HOA funds, money collected from homeowners for maintenance and improvements, had been funneled into personal expenses. Luxury vacations, spa treatments, even designer handbags, all paid for with dues meant to keep the neighborhood running smoothly. The more the agents uncovered, the angrier the crowd became. People who had once feared Evelyn now stared at her with undisguised contempt. For me, watching her squirm brought a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. Part of me wanted to gloat, to say, "See, I told you this wasn't right." But another part felt hollow. This wasn't how I'd imagined things playing out. I hadn't set out to destroy anyone's reputation. I just wanted fairness. Now, seeing Evelyn humiliated in front of everyone, I wondered if we'd gone too far. After the meeting, whispers spread like wildfire. Some neighbors thanked me for standing up to the HOA, calling me brave and saying they wished they'd spoken up sooner. Others remained distant, still wary of rocking the boat even after everything that had happened. The division in the neighborhood ran deep, and it would take time to heal, if it ever did. One evening, as Daniel and I sat on the porch watching the sunset, I voiced the question that had been nagging at me for days. "Do you think we did the right thing?" I asked quietly, wrapping my arms around my knees. Daniel didn't answer right away. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the horizon before finally speaking. I think we did what we had to do. They left us no choice. But yeah, it came at a cost. People are angry, scared, maybe even resentful. It'll take a while for things to settle down. His words didn't ease my guilt entirely, but they reminded me why we'd fought in the first place. Evelyn and her cronies had wielded their power recklessly, using fear and intimidation to keep people in line. Someone had to challenge them, not just for us, but for everyone else who felt powerless. As the investigation continued, changes swept through the neighborhood. Evelyn resigned from the HOA board, along with several other members implicated in the scandal. A new leadership team was elected, made up of residents who promised transparency and accountability. Rules that once felt suffocating were revisited and revised, giving homeowners more freedom to personalize their properties. Slowly but surely, Blue Ridge Lane began to breathe again. And then there was the tree, the towering oak that had sparked it all. Miraculously, it stayed. Once the dust settled, experts determined its roots weren't causing as much damage as initially claimed. New regulations were put in place to protect natural landmarks like it from unnecessary destruction. Every time I looked at those sprawling branches, I felt a surge of pride. That tree wasn't just part of the landscape anymore. It was a symbol of resilience, of standing firm when it mattered most. Still, life in Blue Ridge Lane wasn't perfect. Old wounds took time to heal, and not everyone forgave us for stirring the pot. But maybe perfection wasn't the goal after all. Maybe the real victory lay in proving that even in a place obsessed with appearances, authenticity could still find a way to grow. Months passed, and Blue Ridge Lane began to feel like a different place. The scandal that had once consumed the neighborhood slowly faded into whispers, replaced by cautious optimism. New faces joined the HOA board, people who seemed genuinely invested in making the community better, not just maintaining control. They held open meetings where neighbors could voice concerns without fear of judgment or retaliation. For the first time since we'd moved in, it felt like Blue Ridge Lane belonged to us. The people who lived there, not to a set of rigid rules enforced by someone with a clipboard. The tree, now officially protected under new guidelines, stood tall and proud at the edge of our yard. Its golden leaves shimmered in the autumn sunlight, casting long shadows across the street. Kids played beneath its branches, laughing as they tried to climb its sturdy trunk. It had become more than just a tree. It was a reminder of everything we'd fought for, a symbol of standing firm against injustice, even when the odds seemed impossible. But life wasn't without its challenges. Some neighbors still treated us with suspicion, their smiles polite but distant. I understood why. They'd seen how messy things could get when someone challenged the status quo. Others, however, went out of their way to thank us. Mrs. Peterson, the elderly woman from down the block, brought over a plate of cookies one afternoon. "You did good, dear," she said warmly. "It takes courage to stand up for what's right." Her words stayed with me, softening some of the lingering guilt I carried. Yes, the fight had been messy. And yes, it had divided the neighborhood for a while. But it had also sparked something important, a shift toward accountability and fairness. People were starting to realize they didn't have to live in fear anymore. And that, I told myself, was worth every sleepless night and heated argument. One crisp Saturday morning, Daniel and I decided to tackle a project we'd been putting off, repainting the mailbox. We laughed about it now. The tiny detail that had started this whole ordeal. Back then, it had felt like an attack on our freedom. Now, it felt almost poetic. As we worked side by side, brushes clinking against the metal, I realized how much we'd grown through all of this. We weren't the same couple who'd moved into Blue Ridge Lane dreaming of peace and quiet. We'd learned to fight for what mattered, and to find strength in each other when the world felt overwhelming. That evening, as we sat on the porch sipping hot chocolate, I looked around at the neighborhood bathed in twilight. Lights flickered on inside homes, laughter drifted from open windows, and the faint hum of conversation filled the air. It wasn't perfect, no place ever is, but it was real. Imperfect, messy, and alive. Do you think we'll stay here forever? Daniel asked suddenly, breaking the comfortable silence. I thought about it for a moment, gazing at the oak tree swaying gently in the breeze. Maybe, I said finally. This house, this street, it feels like home now. Not because it's flawless, but because it's ours. He smiled, reaching over to squeeze my hand. Well, if we do stay, let's promise one thing. No more HOA drama. I laughed, leaning my head on his shoulder. Deal. As the stars began to twinkle overhead, I reflected on everything we'd been through. The battle for Blue Ridge Lane had tested us in ways I never could have imagined. It taught me that standing up for yourself isn't always easy, but it's always necessary. It reminded me that communities aren't defined by their rules or appearances, but by the people who live in them. And most importantly, it showed me that sometimes the hardest fights lead to the greatest victories. Blue Ridge Lane wasn't perfect anymore, but maybe that was okay. After all, perfection is overrated. What mattered most was that we fought for fairness, for integrity, and for the soul of our community. And honestly, that felt better than any picket fence ever could.